Hi, welcome to Physionic, where we learn the body from the macro to the micro. If that's something you think you'd be interested in, then consider subscribing. In today's content, we will be reviewing Dr. Mike Van, also known as Dr. Van, also known as Dr. Mike, a series of different names, who is a chiropractic doctor that creates videos on YouTube and has other platforms as well in which he speaks, and we will be dissecting just one of those videos in which he talks about eating 6 small meals a day and why you should be consuming 6 small meals a day. So let's go ahead and dissect that video with some science.
Good morning. This here is going to be your optimal human performance tip of the day. And from the title of this video, I can already see you scratching your heads. 99% of the population should eat frequently. And 99%, that's probably a, pretty reasonable amount of people. 99% of the people relying on multiple small meals a day for their energy. 6 small meals a day who are relying on recently consumed glucose, sugar, or your stored glucose in the form of glycogen as energy. This is absolutely true.
Well, we're off to a good start. 99%. No actual references to back that up or anything. I suppose you don't have to in that situation. You're just kind of throwing out a number to make it clear that you're talking about the vast majority of individuals. Would I say 99%? No, I wouldn't. But we'll just stick with what Dr. Van seems to think is the appropriate percentage. I also find it kind of comical that he says that it's pretty reasonable. Just 99% of the world's population. Pretty reasonable to just kind of generalize to 99% of the population.
You need 6 small meals a day, multiple small meals a day. But why? Why do you need that many meals? Well, let's look at it this way. If you skip a meal, then your blood glucose levels, your blood sugar drops. And your glycogen stores, your stored blood sugar drops down as well.
Let's address this first point. If you skip a meal, do your blood glucose levels decrease? The answer is yes. Yes, they do. And your glycogen levels will probably decrease just barely, marginally. I don't even know if you'd be able to measure it. Of course, it depends on how long you wait till your next meal. But if you just skip one meal on the general premise of eating 6 meals a day, that means that you are just waiting in a few more hours. So we're talking about a difference of like 3 hours or something like that before your next meal. Is that going to make a massive difference on your blood glucose levels? No, it's not.
And then your body will start to catabolize or break down muscle tissue, lowering your metabolism because your lean muscle mass is dropping, therefore making it more difficult to lose excess calories and get the body that you want, the health that you want. All of this is absolutely true.
So let's address Dr. Van's second point, which is if you skip a meal, and in this situation he's talking about how you might see a decrease in blood glucose levels, and I would agree that you might see a minute decrease in blood glucose levels if you essentially just push your meal till later on in the day, which would just be a few hours later based on this 6 meals a day premise. And then he also mentions that in this particular situation that if you skip that meal, then you will also see muscle catabolism. And that is patently untrue. It's untrue because it is a metabolically expensive task to break down proteins, fully functioning proteins in the musculature or really just any cell type, and having it go through what's called the lysosomal or autophagy pathway, meaning that your body has to, or your cells specifically, have to expend a lot of nutrients and a lot of chemicals to actually break down those proteins. And then they go through a variety of different other situations, other pathways that they have to go through to eventually be broken down into their amino acids and then be exported from the muscle to the liver to create more glucose. So that is a lot of work when you could easily just tap into your essentially limitless fat stores that you have in your body. So why would your body break down amino acids for a glucose molecule which will give you less ATP than a fat molecule which is readily accessible? So that's one reason, and I'll be touching on another reason later on. The other point that he makes in this short clip is that if you catabolize your muscle, then you're going to see lower metabolic rate. He's absolutely right about that. That's actually 100% correct. However, again, in terms of this situation, it does not apply.
So if you are living this way in this paradigm where your body is dependent on glucose as your sole energy source, and you've trained your body this way to only use sugar and stored glycogen, then your fat burning capability is literally in a state of non-existent. You do not have the ability to burn fat.
His next point is that if you constantly consume glucose, that your body is suddenly unable to oxidize fat, burn fat. And that is, again, completely untrue. I somewhat understand where he's coming from because there are ways that your body can become better at oxidizing fat, more rapid at oxidizing fat, as well as more rapid at using glucose in whatever situation that you end up priming it towards. However, for the complete inability for your body to oxidize fat is, again, absolutely insane and completely scientifically untrue. I find it absolutely hilarious and a bit frustrating that there are professionals out there that actually believe that you need to consciously tell your body how to react to different situations. I think that's so funny to me, because when you were a child, when you were, let's say, 2 years old or a 1-year-old, and you couldn't think about these things, your body was regulating back and forth, no problem. And it's going to keep doing that for the rest of your life. As long as you keep just normal, moderate, healthy behavior, it's going to have no problem, and that's called physiology, the constant interaction between different organs. It has the ability to continue that process lifelong until you eventually die. But to think that you have to sit there and optimally intake one particular nutrient for general health, that is not the case. And as glucose is in no way a detrimental molecule, there's no reason why, if you continuously take glucose throughout the entire day within the realm of a balanced nutrition protocol, within the realm of a balanced meal, that would have some sort of detrimental impact on your ability to lose fat. You are constantly lipolyzing fat, meaning you are constantly releasing fat and then restoring it or storing new fat. Your body's constantly in flux, and the sooner you can wrap your head around the idea that your body's always in flux, it's always using glucose and it's always using fat, regardless of what you do, it's going to have to use both of them. No matter what you do, it's going to do both. Then you'll have an easier time understanding that extremist situations where you have to do this or you have to do that is just not true. Your body is far more intelligent, and I'm sorry to say this, but your body is more intelligent than you are. Your conscious self is not more intelligent than your body. Your body has evolved hundreds of thousands, millions of years to get to this point, and you really think that you can outsmart that and start to think about all these different protocols that you have to implement. You don't. You absolutely don't. That's not to speak on optimal performance for athletes. I'm just talking about general health. You do not and you cannot outsmart your body.
So if you're always giving your body a fresh supply of glucose every couple hours, then your body will become very, very good at burning glucose, and your body will become absolutely terrible at burning fat. Because fat burning is like a muscle. If you don't use it, you what?
You lose it. Again, not true.
You lose it. Absolutely. And so, as the title of this, video says, you should eat 6 small meals a day if you are solely a sugar burner. Because if you do skip meals and you're a sugar burner, you guys know what I'm talking about. You are going to withhold that energy source from your body, that glucose, and your brain is the first organ that starts to freak out. And many of you know exactly what that's like. Your brain, which needs glucose constantly because you haven't trained it yet to use ketones, goes, holy crap, I need energy. There is no glucose. There is no energy. We need to take immediate action to fix this right now. And so what your body has to do is it has to secrete cortisol from your adrenals. It needs to break down some muscle tissue to release amino acids that can actually convert to glucose in the liver to start to fuel your brain.
The final point that he talks about, which kind of merges with some of the other points that he's talked about, is again this idea that amino acids need to be released and that your liver is going to have to convert those to glucose because your brain is freaking out. I don't think that Dr. Van has a very good idea of kinetics, just understanding the speed by which some of these things happen. If you consume a meal, your blood glucose levels are raised for several hours, mainly because your insulin response is a little bit delayed, and then it has to go through all these different processes to actually shuttle that glucose into your different cells. That said, if you then skip a meal, let's say for 2-3 hours, and then you just have your next meal, so you have one meal, then you skip a meal, and then you have another meal, then that's just an extended period of time in which you are fasting, if you want to call it that. To think that your blood glucose goes up like this, and then suddenly just jam down, and you're just like close to death, like your brain is... For your brain to actually freak out, and well, freak out, like it can sit there and think about it, but for your body to freak out and have this immense reaction where it starts stimulating the release of cortisol would be highly detrimental to every evolutionary process that your body has gone through up to that point. Your body is very good at fine-tuning and modulating your blood glucose levels because it relies on your blood glucose levels on a day-to-day basis, minute-by-minute basis, second by second, nanosecond to nanosecond basis. And you're going to tell me and going to tell your audience that they need to sit there and figure out how to modulate this blood glucose level. Again, if you are healthy in a physiological state, meaning physiology being healthy, I'm not talking about pathophysiology. In a physiological state, let's say 99%, honestly it's probably less than that, but we'll just say 90%, whatever it might be, of individuals that are perfectly healthy do not need to sit there and worry about their blood glucose levels. Your body's taking care of it. It has no issues with that. And if you start to feel maybe really lightheaded or whatever it might be, maybe you have hypoglycemia, maybe you are in the very small minority that might have a few issues with that kind of stuff. And then of course you talk to your doctor, and that might not even be a pathological state. That might just be your variation. That might just be your genetic profile that's led you to this kind of phenotype or this kind of physical showing of particular symptoms. I struggle. I really struggle with the idea that people believe that they have to think for their body as if it's not capable of dealing with whatever you give it. It was designed to deal with whatever you give it, and it will modulate and adapt as it is needed. So back to this kinetics point that I was making before I went off on a little mini rant there. Your body, if you don't consume any glucose for let's say 5 hours or whatever it might be, your glycogen levels don't just suddenly go rock bottom empty. It's not like your muscles and your liver just start expelling glycogen. One, your muscles can't because they don't have the ability, and your liver and your kidneys, which are gluconeogenic and can release glucose into the bloodstream, you have enough glucose in your muscles to feed themselves and enough glucose in your kidneys and liver to spill into the bloodstream for, I'd venture to say, at least 24 hours to 48 hours, maybe even 72 hours before you see any sort of impact on fat mobilization, ketone body production, all these different outcomes that would be the case if you waited for, let's say, 2 or 3 days of constant fasting or eating almost no glucose whatsoever. So he has a kinetics issue in which he thinks that if you skip a meal, that suddenly your blood glucose levels will dip because your glycogen will be completely expended and your body has no ability to create more glucose without the use of amino acids. That is just not the case. It's just not the case. If he were making this case for 3 days of nonstop fasting, then he might have a point. But skipping one meal? Come on.
You know, and that's why I preach so much about fasting and the ketogenic lifestyle. And we're going to talk more about this later on future topics. But for now, you know, that's the solution. We got to become efficient at burning fat.
So Dr. Van's solution is that you need to become good at fat burning. So if we take his extremist standpoint of if you consume glucose, then your body is only going to use glucose, then if you switch to fat, your body will only use fat, okay? So let's think about that for a second. Your red blood cells don't have the ability to use fat. They can't use ketones. They can't use fatty acids. They can't use glycerol, they can't use triglycerides, whatever it might be, they can't use it. They only use glucose. So if we were to really take his point, like down to the crux, down without any sort of leniency one way or another, that would mean that your red blood cells need to somehow convert to fat use for energy, yet they don't have the machinery within those cells to do so. So essentially your red blood cells are going to die. And if your red blood cells die, then, well, frankly, you die. So maybe I need to come out with a diet that specifically targets how to optimize your red blood cell count and how to optimize your red blood cells and how they function and have them create this machinery. No, again, your body doesn't need your help. To switch to one or the other, if you want to do that, that's fine. But your body is always going to use both. Get that in your head. Your body is going to always use glucose and fat simultaneously. It's just a matter of which one is it going to use more of. And it's not going to be based off of 6 small meals a day. All right, guys, hopefully you enjoyed the video. I hope that it was informative. I get pretty worked up about this kind of stuff just because it's really interesting to me, the psychology of what people try and go through. And if I talk slower, then maybe you'll think that I'm connecting with you. That's another tactic that people like to use. Frankly, I think that you're intelligent individuals, and if you learn the science, if you learn the physiology, you'll be able to see through the BS from a mile away. And that's the point of this series. So hopefully you found it informative, hopefully you enjoyed it, and with that said, I hope that I have the pleasure of speaking with you next time. Have a good one. Bye.